Hello, we're going to be looking at lesson 2 of module 7 today. And this is where we're going to be taking a look at um, actually doing multiplication of fractions with uncommon denominators. But in this case, we're not going to be using fraction bars, but instead we're going to be using um, actual computational skills. So first, we're going to take a look at yesterday's lesson. So please look over your assignment, which is on page 152, and check to see that your answers are correct. And if by some chance you um, have a question, please don't hesitate to ask the substitute to help you. Okay, then we're going to move on to the next page. So after you have finished with checking your work and make sure that you have shown it to the substitute so that they can see that you completed it, please open up your math notebook so we can look at today's problem of the day. Now, this should be kind of familiar to you because we did this yesterday at the very end of the class where we found equivalent fractions. And in this case, they show you a model of 1/2 and then 3/6. So what would you need to do in this in order to make it possible to um, be able to solve it? Well, if you started off with what we start with, which is 1/2, and then we have to have a fraction that equals 1, and so that means that the numerator and denominator need to be the same. In this case, it would be 3/3 because they divided that 1/2 into 3 equal pieces, and your answer would be 3/6. That was pretty easy. All right, so we're going to move on to today's lesson. So as we do this, I need you to please open up to page 153 in your workbook. And it says, I can add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators using a common denominator and assess the reasonableness. Okay, assessing the reasonableness has to do with what we did yesterday, looking at the benchmarks. So let's take a look at the first example we have here, which is Jamie is building a bird feeder. He connects 2 metal rods together to make a stand. The blueprint for the project shows the lengths of the rods. What is the total length of the rods? So what we have to do first is identify the actual important information, and we're going to do that by highlighting. So the question being asked here is what? That's not a very good highlighter. Let's see. Oops, there we go. What is the total length of the rods? Okay, and we can see that one is 1/6 and the other is 2/3. They're both in yards. So they first want you to write an expression to model the situation. Okay, so just simply writing the expression, you just write what the fractions are. 1/6, and it says what is the total length. So we're going to be looking at addition plus 2/3. Now this is where I need to deviate because they say find a common denominator for the fractions in this expression. And what would be the common denominator between 3 and 6? Well, if you look at your multiples of 3, it's 3 and 6. And you know that 6 already has a multiple of 6. So our common denominators are going to be 6. But this is where I would like you to get into the habit of doing it the way that I taught you yesterday at the very end of the lesson. So if we write the actual problem off here on the side, I like you to always write it vertically. Whoops. Got to make sure I'm using the right numbers. There we go. 2/3. And we're going to be adding these. And the way to set the problem up is to show your actual finding of your equivalent fractions. So we know that in the end, we're going to want to have both fractions have a denominator of 6. And with this first fraction, that's quite easy because it already has 1/6. So you just put a 1. It's always nice when your common denominator, one of your fractions has that denominator always. But this second one needs to be converted. So just like we did yesterday, just like we did in the problem of the day, we're going to find the equivalent fractions to 2/3 with 6 as a denominator. 3 times what gives you 6? And you should have said 2. And in order to make it so that the fraction is equal to 1, the numerator and denominator need to be exactly the same. 2 times 2 is 4. So now we can add these. 1/6 plus 4/6 is 5/6. Okay, so they say write the equivalent fractions. It would be 1/6 plus 4/6. Okay, they said just write the equivalent fractions. Then it says write the expression using fraction with the common denominator and find the total length. So you'd write this again. 1/6 plus 4/6 equals 5/6. And so how do you know your answer is reasonable? Well, if you look at 1/6 and we used benchmarks, 1/6 is closer to 0. And 2/3 is closer to 1. So 0 plus 1 equals 1. And if you look at 5/6, 5/6 is close to 1. Okay, I'm going to use this symbol because that means close to or similar to 1. Okay, and you can say, I use benchmarks. Let me just type that in so it doesn't take me as long. Okay, and let me move this over. 0 and 1 to equal 1, and 5 is close to 1. 5/6 is close to 1. So that's how you explain whether the answer is reasonable. Okay, so we are going to erase this and move on to the next page. If by some chance I just did that too quick, you can pause it and go ahead back to write down some of those things again. I apologize. Okay, so we move on to the next page. And once again, we need to grab our highlighter. And it says, Jamie fastens the bottom of the bird feeder to the pole. He has 4 boards that each are 5-6 foot long. How much more must Jamie cut from each board to make each side of the feeder 3/4 foot long? Okay, so first they want you to do is they want you to write the expression. Okay, so first let's identify what the problem is. How much must Jamie cut from each board to make each side of the bird feeder 3/4 foot long? Okay, so he has 4 boards that are 5/6 foot long, and he wants to make them 3/4 foot long, and this is just to validate that information. So how much must Jamie cut? The labels are the same, so we use addition or subtraction, and because they said how much should he cut, cut would mean taking away. So we're going to write the fraction 5/6 minus 3/4. Now the next one says, write an expression using fractions with a common denominator to model the problem, then find how much Jamie must cut each board. So let's go off here to the side and let's set this up the way that helps us to be successful. So we're going to write 5/6 minus 3/4. Now, some of you might have gotten into the habit of looking and saying, well, if I just multiply 6 times 4, that's 24. But you want to find the least common denominator, okay? So if we start to find the multiples of 4, and we go 4, 8, 12, 16. Then let's start finding our multiples of 6. 6, 12. We see that there is a smaller denominator of 12. So we're going to set this up. And in this case, we are going to have to change both fractions because neither fraction has a denominator that is already in place. So we're going to write down 12s here. And we're going to set the rest of this up because we're going to have to multiply it by some fraction that equals 1 to get 12, and some fraction that equals 1 to get 12 as a denominator. So 6 times what gives me 12? Well, let's count. 1, 2. So that's going to be a 2, and whatever's on the denominator also has to be in the numerator. So this is going to be 10/12. And then do the same for the other. 4 times what gives me 12? And that would be 3. So we have to multiply this by 3. 3 times 3 equals 9/12. Now remember, we are still subtracting. So 10/12 minus 9/12 equals 1/12. So if we were to write this entire equation out, it says write an expression using fractions with common denominator to model the problem, then find how much Jamie must cut from each board. You would do 10/12. That's an ugly looking 10, but that's okay. Minus 9/12 equals 1/12. Okay, so once again, they're asking, how do you know if the answer is reasonable? Well, 3/4 is going to be closer to 1. So you would, let's type some of this up. I would use a benchmark. So let me figure out where I need to be. I would use the benchmark of 1 plus, or sorry, 1 minus 1, because 6 is close to 1 and 3/4 is close to 1. So that would equal 0. Okay. And 0 is closer to 1/12. So this is basically how you do it. Make sure you find the common denominator and then add or subtract. So let's clear that out and go to today's check understanding. Once again, you should always start off with your highlighter. Jamie starts with 7/8 ounce of glue. After a project, 1/4 ounce of glue is left. Write an expression that can be used to find how much glue Jamie used, solve the problem, and show that your answer is reasonable. Okay, so what's the question? They're wanting you to write an expression that can be used to find how much glue Jamie used, and then solve the problem, and then show that your answer is reasonable. And our information is 7/8 ounce of glue he starts with, and 1/4 ounce of glue is left. Okay, so both units are the same. Both labels are the same, so we're going to be adding or subtracting, and in this case, they want to know how much glue Jamie uses. So this is going to be a subtraction problem. So you first have to write an expression, 7/8 minus 1/4. Now, your brain should already start be juicing up to see what's going to be my common denominators. And if you take 7/8 and you set it up properly, and you take 1/4, I always say find the multiples of the smaller number, and we're going to be subtracting here. So 4, it'd be 4 and then 8. And some of you might have already figured out without even having to write the multiples that it was going to be 8. Which is kind of convenient because we don't have to do anything to this fraction. This one, we do have to do a little bit of work, but not much. We're going to multiply it by 4 times 2 equals 8. So whatever we do in the denominator, we do in the numerator. 1 times 2 equals 2. And 7/8 minus 2/8 equals 5/8. So if you wanted to show how your answer is reasonable, well, first let's write the problem as it should be with common denominators. 7/8 minus 2/8 equals 5/8. Whoops, it's a little bit too big, but that's okay. All right, and then show that your answer is reasonable. Once again, we use that catchphrase. I used the benchmarks. Let's see, 7/8 is going to be close to 1. And 1/4, that's a kind of a touchy one because that's like right in the middle between 0 and 1/2. So I'm going to say that we're going to do minus 1/2. And that will equal 1/2. And 5/8 is close to 1/2. Stretch this out so it's all up there. Write the expression using fractions with common denominators, then find the sum or difference. Thank goodness we don't have to do this benchmark stuff. So we just write it all out to be able to figure out what the solution is. So we have 2/3 minus 1/5 Now, some of you might be already saying, I know exactly what the common denominator is. It is, but some other people might not. So they need to find the multiples and start with the smaller one. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. And if you did your 5s, it'd be 5, 10, 15. Now, some of you might have already figured out, because you have that mathematical ability, you figured out already that was 15. So if that's you, just go on. Keep going on your own and see if by the time I'm done, if you have the same answer. So you're going to find the equivalent fraction. 3 times what gives you 15? That would be 5. So we have to make this 5/5. And 2 times 5 is 10. And over here, we have to multiply it by 3/3, because 5 times 3 is 15. So we want a fraction that equals 1. So 1 times 3 is 3. And when we take 10 minus 3, that's going to be 7. And the denominator stays the same, 15ths. This isn't too difficult. You just have to find the common denominator and then convert to equivalent fractions. Now, you're going to start seeing patterns take place. Like this one is 1/6 plus 3/4. Now you can list all your multiples out, but you could also look back. We already had a fraction that had a 6 and a 4, and we found that the actual answer, the equivalent fraction, or the common denominator was going to be 12. So you can start to see some of these patterns developing. When you see 6 and 4, you're going to know it's 12. When you see 3 and 5, you're going to know it is 15. When you see 2 and 3, you're going to know that it's 6, because they repeat a lot. So you're going to put down a 12. And then you're going to multiply by a fraction that equals 1. 4 or 6 times what gives me 12? That would be 2. So the numerator would be 2. 1 times 2 is 2. And then 4 times what gives me 12? That would be 3. So it'd be 3/3. 3 times 3 is 9. And we add that out, and we end up with 11/12 as our final answer. Now, if you're struggling with this, you could either go back and watch the video a second time, or you could also go on to the video review that is at the very beginning of the lesson. This will help you to just review, maybe from somebody other than myself, to help you to know how to add and subtract fractions with uncommon denominators. So we're going to move on to the final part, which is you're on your own. Okay, so you're going to complete the next couple pages on your own, and those are pages 155 and 156. So please complete this. Be also working on your 2023 review, and also be working on any IXLs you still don't have completed. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask the substitute to help you with this. Or you can even shoot me an email, and I'll see as best as I can to try and help you answer your question through email. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you as soon as I am back in school. Thank you so much. Goodbye.